The stage-coach door swung open, and Olivia Dawson tumbled out into the snow, her lips blue and her hands wrapped in bloodied cloth, collapsing at the feet of a tall man who caught her before she hit the frozen ground. She had been clinging to the outside of that coach for 12 miles through a February blizzard in 1878, too terrified to stay at the last station where 3 men had cornered her in the stable, their intentions clear in their leering eyes and grasping hands. Xavier Ellsworth had just finished securing his horses in the livery stable when the stage rattled into Castle Dome, Arizona territory, which seemed impossible given that snow rarely fell this hard in the desert town. But this winter had proven exceptional, with temperatures dropping to levels the old-timers swore they had never witnessed in all their years. He had turned at the sound of hooves and witnessed the woman fall, catching her reflexively, his strong arms wrapping around her trembling form. "Help me," she whispered through chattering teeth, her green eyes wild with fear and pain. "Please do not let them find me." Xavier did not waste time with questions. He could see the frostbite darkening her fingers where the cloth had come loose, could feel the violent shaking that racked her body, could smell the fear pouring off her in waves. He lifted her easily despite his own exhaustion from 3 days of riding fence lines in the brutal cold, and carried her toward the boarding house where he kept a room. "Mrs. Chen," he called out as he shouldered through the door of the 2-story wooden building. "I need hot water, blankets, and whatever medical supplies you have." The proprietor, a Chinese woman who had come west with the railroad workers and stayed when her husband died, took one look at the half-frozen woman and started barking orders to her teenage son. Within minutes, Xavier had Olivia in his room, laying her on his bed while Mrs. Chen brought in basin after basin of lukewarm water. "Not too hot," Mrs. Chen warned. "Warm her slow or tissue dies." Xavier had seen frostbite before, during a winter he had spent in Colorado hunting. He knew Mrs. Chen spoke truth. He began carefully unwrapping the cloth from Olivia's hands, revealing fingers that had gone white and waxy at the tips. She whimpered as he lowered them into the first basin, her whole body tensing. "I know it hurts," he said softly, his voice carrying the gentle drawl of someone raised in Texas. "But we have to warm you up gradual-like. What is your name?" "Olivia," she managed. "Olivia Dawson." "I am Xavier Ellsworth. You are safe here, Olivia. Nobody is going to hurt you." Her eyes searched his face, looking for deception, for danger. She had learned in her 22 years that men's words often meant nothing, that kindness could turn to cruelty in a heartbeat. But something in Xavier's steady gaze, in the careful gentleness of his large hands as he tended her injuries, made her want to believe him. "There were men," she began, her voice breaking, "at the station in Yuma. They said things. One of them grabbed me when I went to use the privy. I ran, but they followed. I climbed onto the coach because I could not get back inside the station building without passing them. I thought I could hold on until the next stop, but the storm got worse." Xavier's jaw tightened, but his hands remained steady. "How long were you out there?" "I do not know. Hours. My hands went numb after the first hour. I tied myself to the rail with my shawl, but the wind kept tearing at me." Mrs. Chen returned with more blankets and a cup of hot broth. "She needs drink this. Small sips." Xavier helped Olivia sit up enough to drink, supporting her shoulders as she sipped the salty liquid. Her hands were still submerged in the warming water, and he could see sensation returning by the way she winced and bit her lip. "The pain means the tissue is still alive," he told her. "That is good." "It does not feel good," she whispered, but there was the faintest hint of humor in her voice. Over the next hour, Xavier and Mrs. Chen worked to warm Olivia completely. They removed her frozen outer garments, preserving her modesty with blankets while getting her into one of Mrs. Chen's nightgowns. Her feet had also suffered from the cold, though not as severely as her hands. Xavier sat beside the bed, changing out the water basins as they cooled, talking to her in that low, steady voice that somehow made the pain more bearable. "Why were you traveling alone?" he asked, not from judgment but curiosity. "I was not meant to be alone. I was traveling with my aunt, but she took ill in Tucson, pneumonia. She died 3 days ago." Olivia's voice caught. "I was bringing her body back to California for burial, but the undertaker said I needed more money for transport. I had to leave her there. I was trying to get to my cousin in Phoenix. I am sorry for your loss." The simple sincerity in his words broke something open inside her, and tears began to flow down her cheeks. Xavier did not tell her to stop crying or offer empty platitudes. He simply sat with her, holding her damaged hands in the warm water, letting her grieve. As the evening wore on and lamplight filled the room with a golden glow, Olivia studied her rescuer. Xavier looked to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that brushed his collar and eyes the color of aged whiskey. His face was weathered from years under the sun, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he was not smiling now. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, his hands calloused and strong, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. Xavier met her gaze. "Because you needed help. Does there need to be another reason? In my experience, yes." "Then your experience has been with the wrong sort of men." Mrs. Chen brought up a tray of food, simple but nourishing. Chicken and rice, fresh bread, and tea sweetened with honey. Xavier's own stomach growled at the sight, reminding him he had not eaten since dawn. Mrs. Chen gave him a knowing look. "You eat too. Cannot help if you starve." She left them with the tray, and Xavier fixed a plate for Olivia, cutting the chicken into small pieces since her hands were still too damaged to manage utensils well. He helped her eat, his movements practical and unself-conscious, until she insisted she could manage with her wrapped hands. Then he ate his own meal, suddenly ravenous. "You live here?" "In Castle Dome," Olivia asked between bites. "I work at the Running Creek Ranch about 10 miles east. The owner, Douglas Running Creek, he is a good man, fair employer. I have been with him 3 years now. I come into town sometimes when the work is done." Running Creek, that is not a common name. His mother was Apache. His father was a rancher from Kansas who had the good sense to fall in love with a smart woman. Douglas inherited the ranch when his father died. He has made it profitable despite some folks around here not liking that he is half Apache. Olivia heard the edge in Xavier's voice, the protective loyalty. "You are friends, then, not just employer and worker." "Douglas gave me a job when I needed one, no questions asked." "That makes him more than a friend in my book." They fell into comfortable silence as they finished eating. The warmth of the room, the food in her belly, and the exhaustion of her ordeal began to catch up with Olivia. Her eyelids grew heavy. "You should sleep," Xavier said, taking the tray. "Your hands are going to hurt worse tomorrow when the blood flow fully returns. You need rest." "Where will you sleep?" "I will get another room from Mrs. Chen." But when he spoke to the proprietor, every room was full. A mining company had sent surveyors to town, and they had rented every available space. Mrs. Chen looked apologetic. "You sleep in chair in your room," she suggested, "or I make pallet in kitchen." Xavier chose the chair in his room, dragging it close to the fire and settling in with a spare blanket. Olivia was already asleep when he returned. Her face relaxed in a way it had not been while awake, making her look younger and more vulnerable. He found himself wondering about her story, about what had brought her west. about the fear that still lingered in her eyes even when she tried to hide it. The night passed slowly. Xavier dozed in fits and starts, waking whenever Olivia whimpered in her sleep or when the fire needed tending. Twice she cried out, trapped in nightmares, and he moved to the bedside to wake her gently, his hand on her shoulder, his voice low and soothing. "You are safe, just dreams, you are safe." The second time she grabbed his hand with her bandaged one, holding tight. "Stay, please." So he sat on the edge of the bed, his hand in hers, until she fell back into quieter sleep. The trust implicit in that gesture moved something in his chest, made him more determined to protect this woman who had literally fallen into his life. Morning came with pale winter sunlight filtering through the window. Olivia woke to find Xavier asleep in the chair, his head tipped back and his breathing deep and even. She flexed her hands cautiously, wincing at the pain but relieved to see that the color had improved. The frostbite was real, the damage evident, but Mrs. Chen's knowledge and Xavier's care had likely saved her fingers. She studied him in the morning light, this stranger who had shown her more genuine kindness than most people she had known her whole life. Her parents had died when she was 15, leaving her to the care of her mother's sister, Aunt Margaret. Margaret had been strict but not unkind, teaching Olivia to sew and keep house, to read and cipher, all the skills a respectable woman needed. But there had been little warmth, little affection. When Margaret's health began to fail, she had decided to visit her brother in Arizona Territory, hoping the dry air would help her lungs. Instead, she had caught pneumonia and died within a week. Olivia had been alone in the world since then, carrying what little money they had left, trying to reach the cousin in Phoenix that Margaret had mentioned in passing years ago. She was not even certain the cousin existed, not really. It had simply seemed better than staying in Tucson with no prospects and no protection. Xavier stirred, his eyes opening to find her watching him. For a moment neither spoke, the morning light soft around them. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. "Sore. But better than I have any right to feel, thanks to you." He stood and stretched, his joints popping. "Let me see your hands." She held them out, and he carefully unwrapped the bandages Mrs. Chen had applied the night before. The fingertips were blistered and darkened, but not black. He touched them gently, checking for sensation. "Can you feel this?" "Yes, it hurts, but I can feel it." "Good. That is good." He wrapped them again with fresh bandages from the supplies Mrs. Chen had left. "You will likely lose some skin as it heals, maybe the tips of your nails, but I think you will keep your fingers. Because of you." Xavier shook his head. "Because you were strong enough to survive. I just helped a little." Mrs. Chen brought breakfast and fresh water for washing. She examined Olivia's hands with a critical eye, then nodded approval at Xavier's handiwork. "You have good touch, gentle. My husband was same way." She said it matter-of-factly, but there was old grief in her eyes. "I bring salve later, old recipe, very good for healing." After Mrs. Chen left, Xavier helped Olivia wash and eat, his manner kind but not pitying. She appreciated that more than she could say. When she was settled back against the pillows, he pulled the chair close. "What are your plans now?" he asked. Olivia looked down at her bandaged hands. "I suppose I continue to Phoenix. Find my cousin if she exists. If not, find work of some kind." "What kind of work can you do?" "I can sew, though not like this." She raised her hands ruefully. "I can cook and clean. I can read and write and do figures. I helped my aunt keep her accounts." Xavier was quiet for a moment, turning something over in his mind. Douglas's wife Sarah is expecting their second child in a few months. She was just saying last week that she wished she had help around the house, especially with their daughter being only 2 years old. The ranch is remote, and there are not many women nearby she can call on. "You think they might hire me?" I think it is worth asking. The pay would be fair and you would have a safe place to stay while your hands heal. He paused. Unless you would rather go to Phoenix. Olivia thought about traveling on alone, about arriving in a city where she knew no one, about searching for a cousin who might not want the burden of a penniless relation. Then she thought about staying near this man with the gentle hands and steady presence, about having work and purpose, about being somewhere she might actually be welcome. I would like to meet them. Your friends. Xavier's smile transformed his face, warming those whiskey-colored eyes. I will send word to Douglas. It will be a few days before you are fit to travel anyway. The road to the ranch is rough even in good weather, and with this snow it will be harder. Over the next 3 days, Xavier barely left Olivia's side except to tend to necessary business and check on his horses at the livery. He brought her books from the small lending library in town, read to her when her hands hurt too much to hold the volumes herself, and talked with her for hours about everything and nothing. She learned that he had grown up in East Texas, the youngest of 4 brothers. His parents had run a small farm, but when the war came, his 3 older brothers had gone to fight. None of them came home. His mother had died of a broken heart, his father of exhaustion trying to work the farm alone. Xavier had been 16, too young for the war but old enough to know he could not save the farm by himself. He had sold it and headed west, working cattle drives and ranch jobs, moving from place to place until he found Douglas running creek and a reason to stay put. What made you stop wandering? Olivia asked. I got tired of running, and Douglas offered me something more than just a job. He offered me a place, a purpose. His ranch is not just about raising cattle. He is trying to prove that people of different backgrounds can work together, can build something good. His crew is white, Mexican, Apache, even a freed slave from Louisiana named Thomas. We all eat at the same table, get paid the same wages for the same work. Some folks in town think Douglas is crazy, but his cattle fetch top dollar and his hands are loyal. That means something. Olivia heard the passion in his voice, the belief. You care about it, about what he is building. I do. I spent too many years seeing people treated as less than human because of the color of their skin or where they came from. My best friend growing up was the son of freed slaves who sharecropped the land next to ours. When the war came, some folks in town burned his family's cabin, killed his father. My parents hid him and his mother in our cellar for a month before they could escape north. I was 10 years old, and I learned that day that the world is full of people who will hurt others just because they can. But I also learned that there are people who will stand up and do what is right, even when it is hard. I want to be the second kind. Olivia reached out with her bandaged hand and touched his arm. You are. You proved that when you helped me. Their eyes met and held, and something passed between them, a recognition that went deeper than words. Xavier covered her hand with his, careful of her injuries, and they sat like that as the afternoon light slanted through the window. On the 4th day, Douglas Running Creek arrived in town driving a sturdy wagon lined with blankets and straw for warmth. He was a man in his middle 30s, tall and lean, with his mother's high cheekbones and dark eyes and his father's broad shoulders. He greeted Xavier with genuine warmth, clasping his hand. Xavier says you have been playing nurse. Not by choice, but someone had to keep the woman from freezing to death. Douglas turned to Olivia, his expression kind. My wife Sarah sent me to fetch you if you are willing to come. She said any woman brave enough to hang onto a stagecoach in a blizzard is brave enough to handle ranch life. Xavier told you, Olivia said, glancing at the cowboy. I told him everything, Xavier confirmed. Douglas does not keep secrets from his wife and she will be your employer. She had a right to know. Sarah also said to tell you that we have plenty of room, the work is honest, and you will be treated with respect, Douglas added. Our home is not fancy, but it is warm and safe. And if those men from Yuma show up looking for you, they will find themselves facing some very unfriendly cowboys. The matter-of-fact way he said it, the implicit promise of protection, made Olivia's throat tight. Thank you. I would be honored to work for you and your wife. The journey to Running Creek Ranch took most of the day, the wagon moving slowly over roads rutted with frozen mud. Xavier rode alongside on his bay gelding, keeping pace with the wagon. Douglas drove, telling Olivia about the ranch and his family. Sarah is from Boston, he explained. Her father was a lawyer who did work for the government. She came west with him when he was appointed territorial judge. We met when I had to testify in a land dispute case. She sat in the courtroom every day sketching people. She said I had an interesting face. She sounds remarkable. She is. Her family did not approve of me, but Sarah never cared much for other people's opinions. When her father died last year, she inherited his library. 300 books. Our house is full of them. He said it with pride. The ranch came into view as the sun began to set, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley between low hills. The main house was built of adobe and wood, with a wide porch and shuttered windows. Smoke curled from the chimney, and lamplight glowed warmly from inside. Beyond the house stood a large barn, several corrals, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. As the wagon pulled up to the house, the front door opened and a woman stepped out. Sarah Running Creek was petite and blonde, her belly round with pregnancy beneath her practical wool dress. She hurried down the steps as quickly as her condition allowed, her face alight with welcome. You must be Olivia. I am so glad you have come. Douglas, help her down carefully. Xavier, bring those bags. And for heaven's sake, everyone come inside before we all freeze. The warmth of the house enveloped them, and with it the smell of baking bread and wood smoke. A little girl with dark braids peeked around Sarah's skirts, staring at the newcomers with wide eyes. This is our daughter, Emma, Sarah said, scooping the child up. Emma, can you say hello? Hello, the girl whispered, then buried her face in her mother's shoulder. The house was indeed full of books, lining shelves built into every available wall. But it was also full of comfortable furniture, bright woven rugs, and the evidence of a well-loved home. Sarah showed Olivia to a small bedroom off the kitchen, simply furnished but clean and cheerful. This was meant to be my sewing room, but I never seemed to find time for sewing, Sarah said with a laugh. I hope it will suit you. The work I need help with is mostly watching Emma, helping with cooking and cleaning, and keeping me from going mad with boredom when Douglas and the men are out working cattle. I am not used to being idle, and pregnancy has made me tire more easily than I like. It sounds perfect, Olivia said honestly. Good. Now let me see those hands that Xavier has been so worried about. Olivia held out her hands, and Sarah unwrapped them with competent efficiency. She examined the healing frostbite, then nodded. Mrs. Chen's salve is working. We will continue with that. You will have scars, but you will keep full function, I think. You are very lucky Xavier found you when he did. I know. Sarah's sharp eyes studied Olivia's face, seeing more than Olivia would have liked. He is a good man, one of the best I have known. He carries a lot of pain from his past, but it has made him kind rather than cruel. That is rare. Over the following weeks, Olivia settled into life at Running Creek Ranch. Her hands healed slowly, the blistered skin sloughing off and new pink skin growing beneath. Sarah taught her the rhythms of the household, and Emma warmed to her quickly, following her around like a small shadow. Xavier came to the main house every evening for dinner. Douglas insisted that his form and eat with the family rather than in the bunkhouse, a mark of respect and friendship. Olivia looked forward to those dinners more than she wanted to admit, to the sound of Xavier's voice as he discussed the day's work with Douglas, to the way his eyes sought hers across the table, to the moments after the meal when they would sit by the fire while Sarah put Emma to bed. They talked about everything during those quiet evenings. Books they had read, places they had been, dreams they harbored. Xavier spoke of wanting to have his own small ranch someday, nothing grand, just enough land to run a modest herd and live independently. Olivia confessed that she had always wanted to learn to ride a horse properly, not side saddle like a lady but astride like the cowboys did. "I will teach you," Xavier offered, "when your hands are fully healed and the weather warms. Do you promise?" "I promise." One evening in late March, when the worst of the winter had passed and early wildflowers were beginning to bloom on the hillsides, Xavier made good on his promise. He saddled a gentle mare named Daisy and led her to the front of the house where Olivia waited, dressed in an old pair of Sarah's riding clothes that had been altered to fit. "You are certain about this?" Xavier asked. "Sarah will not mind you borrowing her clothes," she insisted. "She said she will not fit into them again for months anyway, and they should get some use." Xavier helped Olivia mount, his hands steady on her waist as he lifted her into the saddle. The feel of his hands, the easy strength of him, made her heart beat faster. She settled into the seat, adjusting her feet in the stirrups under his guidance. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Strange. Higher than I expected, but good." He mounted his own horse and they walked the animals slowly around the yard, Xavier calling out instructions and corrections. Olivia was a quick study, her natural balance helping her adjust to the horse's movements. After an hour of work in the yard, Xavier suggested they try a short ride. They headed out across the rangeland, moving at an easy walk. The afternoon sun was warm on their shoulders, and the air smelled of sage and new grass. Olivia felt a sense of freedom she had never experienced before, sitting astride the horse, the land spreading out around her in every direction. "This is wonderful," she called to Xavier. He grinned at her and she grinned back, and the world seemed full of possibility. They rode for an hour, Xavier pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the ranch. He showed her where a flash flood had nearly swept him away his first summer working there, where Douglas had proposed to Sarah under a cottonwood tree, where a mountain lion had killed a calf last fall. As they turned back toward the ranch house, Xavier pulled his horse alongside hers. "You are a natural rider. Another few lessons and you will be ready to help move cattle." "Do you mean that?" "I do not say things I do not mean, Olivia." The use of her given name, the sincerity in his voice made her bold. "Xavier, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why have you never married? Sarah told me women in town have set their caps for you since you arrived." He was quiet for a long moment, and she worried she had overstepped, but when he spoke, his voice was honest. "I never found anyone who made me want to stop and put down roots. I told myself I was not the marrying kind, that I was too restless, too broken by what I had seen and lost. But the truth is, I was waiting. I just did not know what for. And now," he turned in his saddle to face her fully, his eyes intense. "Now I know. I was waiting for you." Olivia's breath caught. They had stopped their horses, sitting there in the middle of the open range with the sun starting to dip toward the western horizon. "Xavier, I know it is soon. I know you have been through hell and maybe the last thing you need is some cowboy declaring his feelings. But I also know that life is short and uncertain, and I am tired of pretending I do not feel what I feel. From the moment you fell into my arms, something in me recognized something in you, like I had been waiting my whole life for that moment." Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sorrow. I feel it too. I have been afraid to say it, afraid it was just gratitude or loneliness or some trick my mind was playing. But it is not. Xavier, when I look at you, I see home. I see safety. I see a future I did not think I could have. He dismounted in one fluid motion and came to her, reaching up to help her down. She slid from the saddle into his arms and he held her there, his face buried in her hair. "I love you," he whispered. "I know it is fast and probably foolish, but I love you, Olivia Dawson." "I love you too," she whispered back, and it felt like the truest thing she had ever said. He pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. Then he kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. It was a kiss full of promise and passion, of relief and recognition of two people finding each other against impossible odds. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Not today, not tomorrow if you need time, but someday. Be my wife, Olivia. Let me spend the rest of my life proving I can make you happy." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They rode back to the ranch holding hands, their horses walking close together. Sarah took one look at their faces when they arrived and started laughing. "Douglas, you owe me $5. I said it would happen before April." Douglas pulled out his wallet with a rueful smile. "I thought they would wait until at least May. Too practical, both of them." "Nothing practical about love," Sarah said, going to embrace Olivia. "I am so happy for you both." The engagement was short, just long enough for Olivia's hands to finish healing and for Xavier to build a small cabin on a piece of land. Douglas sold him at the edge of the ranch property. It was not much, just 2 rooms and a loft, but Xavier built it with his own hands, with Douglas and the other ranch hands helping when they could spare time. Olivia sewed curtains and a quilt, her healed fingers still stiff but functional. Sarah helped her make a simple wedding dress from cream-colored wool, practical but pretty. They planned a small ceremony for the first week of June, to be held at the ranch with the local minister officiating. But 2 weeks before the wedding, trouble arrived. Olivia was hanging laundry in the yard when she saw 3 men ride up the long drive to the ranch. Something about the way they sat their horses, the way they looked around with calculating eyes, made her stomach drop. She recognized one of them, the man who had cornered her at the Yuma station, and fear flooded through her. She dropped the laundry basket and ran for the house, calling for Sarah. But the men had seen her, and they spurred their horses forward, cutting her off before she could reach the door. "Well, well," the leader said, the one she recognized. His name was Colton, and his eyes were just as mean as she remembered. "If it is not the little lady who ran out on us, we have been looking for you for months." "Get off this property," Olivia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You have no business here." "Oh, but we do. See, you owe us. We paid good money for your company at that station and you ran off without delivering." "I owe you nothing. I never agreed to anything." Colton dismounted, his 2 companions following suit. They started to advance on Olivia and she backed toward the house, her heart hammering. The front door opened and Sarah stepped out, holding a rifle with impressive competence despite her pregnant belly. "The lady told you to leave. I suggest you listen." Colton laughed. "This is between us and her, madam. No need for you to get involved. Everything that happens on this ranch is my business. You are trespassing. Leave now, or I will shoot you for trespassing. Arizona law gives me that right." One of the other men went for his gun, and Sarah fired, the bullet kicking up dirt at his feet. Emma started crying inside the house, and Olivia could hear the fear in the child's wails. "The next one goes through your skull," Sarah said calmly, already levering another round into the chamber. But before anyone could move, the sound of hoofbeats thundered from the direction of the range. Xavier and Douglas appeared, riding hard with 3 other ranch hands behind them. They had heard the gunshot from where they were working and came at a gallop. Xavier took in the scene in an instant, his face going hard when he saw the men threatening Olivia. He dismounted before his horse even stopped, striding forward with deadly purpose. "Step away from her. Now." Colton turned, assessing the opposition. 6 armed men, all looking ready for a fight, plus a woman who had already proven she could shoot. The odds were not in his favor. "This does not concern you, Cowboy. That woman is my fiancée. Everything that concerns her concerns me. You have 3 seconds to get on your horses and ride out, or we will bury you on this ranch, and no one will ever know what happened to you." The cold certainty in Xavier's voice made it clear he was not bluffing. Colton looked from him to Douglas to the other armed men, then at Sarah still holding the rifle with steady hands. "This is not over," he said, but he was already backing toward his horse. "Yes, it is," Xavier said. "If I ever see you again, if you ever come near Olivia again, I will kill you." "That is not a threat. It is a promise." The 3 men mounted and rode out, casting dark looks over their shoulders. But they rode out, and that was what mattered. Xavier went straight to Olivia, pulling her into his arms. She was shaking, the fear and adrenaline catching up with her. "I thought they were going to." She could not finish the sentence. "They did not. You are safe. I will always keep you safe." Douglas checked to make sure the men were truly leaving, then came to where Sarah stood on the porch. He took the rifle gently from her hands and examined her face. "Are you all right? The baby?" "We are fine. Just angry. How dare they come here and threaten people on our land?" "They will not come back," Douglas said. "And if they do, they will regret it." That evening, after Emma was in bed and Olivia's nerves had settled, Xavier and she walked to their cabin, still unfinished but with a roof and walls and a door that locked. He built a fire in the new stone fireplace and they sat together on the floor, wrapped in blankets. "I was terrified," Olivia admitted. "Not just for myself, but for Sarah and Emma, for you. I keep thinking about what could have happened. But it did not happen. You were brave, Sarah was brave, and we got there in time." He stroked her hair, his touch soothing. "But I understand the fear. I felt it too when I saw those men near you. I have never been so scared in my life. I do not want to be afraid anymore, Xavier. I want to feel safe. I want to be able to live without looking over my shoulder. Then we will make that happen. Maybe we should move up the wedding. I want you to have my name, my protection, everything I can give you." Olivia pulled back to look at him. "Do you mean get married now? Before June?" "Why not? The cabin is livable enough. We have each other. The minister can come tomorrow if he is available." "Unless you want the big ceremony Sarah was planning." "I want you," Olivia said simply. "The ceremony does not matter. Being your wife, that is what matters." They were married 2 days later in the main room of the ranch house, with Sarah and Douglas as witnesses and Emma as flower girl. The minister, a kind older man who had known Douglas since he was a boy, pronounced them man and wife as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows. Xavier kissed his bride, and Olivia kissed him back, and when they broke apart, both were smiling through happy tears. The small gathering celebrated with a dinner Sarah had prepared, and toasts were made with wine Douglas had been saving for a special occasion. As the evening wore on and the sun set, Xavier and Olivia walked hand in hand to their cabin, ready to begin their married life. The cabin was small but cozy, warmed by the fire Xavier had built earlier. Olivia lit candles while Xavier closed and locked the door, then they came together in the middle of the room. "Hello, wife," Xavier said softly. "Hello, husband." They took their time that night, learning each other with hands and lips and whispered words. Xavier was gentle, mindful of Olivia's innocence, but passionate too, showing her with his body what he had already told her with words, that he loved her completely and would cherish her always. Olivia gave herself to him without reservation, trusting him with her body as she already trusted him with her heart. The pleasure was intense, overwhelming at times, but also felt right and good and perfect. When they finally lay exhausted in each other's arms, the candles burning low and the fire crackling, Olivia felt a peace she had never known. "Are you all right?" Xavier asked, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "I am more than all right. I am happy. Truly happy, perhaps for the first time in my life. Good. Because I plan to make you happy every day for the rest of our lives. That is quite an ambitious goal. I have always been ambitious when it comes to things that matter." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and if Olivia had nightmares, Xavier was there to wake her gently and remind her that she was safe, she was loved, she was home. The months that followed were full of hard work and simple joy. Xavier continued working at Running Creek Ranch, and Olivia still helped Sarah part-time, especially as her pregnancy advanced. But they also had their own life, their own rhythms. Olivia learned to ride well enough to help move cattle, though Xavier still worried when she insisted on joining the roundups. She proved herself capable, earning the respect of the other ranch hands with her grit and determination. Xavier taught her to shoot, and she became proficient enough with a rifle that he stopped worrying quite so much about her safety when he was working far from the cabin. They talked about their future, about the children they wanted, about expanding the cabin someday, about maybe getting a few head of their own cattle to start building a herd. Xavier had saved most of his wages for years, and combined with what little Olivia had managed to keep from her aunt's modest estate, they had enough to make plans. In August, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy, whom she and Douglas named Samuel. Olivia helped with the delivery, her steady hands and calm presence a comfort to Sarah through the long hours of labor. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced, Olivia felt tears on her cheeks, moved by the miracle of new life. Holding little Samuel afterward, watching his tiny fingers curl around hers, Olivia felt a longing she had not expected. "Someday," Xavier said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. He had read her thoughts as clearly as if she had spoken them aloud. "Someday soon, if you want." "I want," she whispered. That winter was mild compared to the one that had brought them together, and when spring came around again, Olivia realized she had not had her monthly courses in over 2 months. Sarah, experienced now with 2 children, confirmed what Olivia suspected. "You are pregnant. Congratulations." Xavier's joy when Olivia told him was incandescent. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, then set her down carefully as if she were made of glass. "Easy," she said, amused. "I am not fragile. You are carrying our child. I am allowed to be careful with you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Olivia continued working until her belly grew too large to be practical. Then she focused on preparing the cabin for the baby. Xavier built a cradle from polished pine, carving birds and horses into the headboard. Sarah helped Olivia sew tiny clothes, and Emma, now 3, was thrilled at the idea of another baby to play with. Douglas gave Xavier a raise and a bonus, acknowledging that his foreman would soon have another mouth to feed. The other hands threw a celebration, gifting the couple with practical items they would need. Olivia was moved by the generosity of these rough, hard-working men who had become like family. In early November, on a crisp autumn morning, Olivia went into labor. Sarah came to help, bringing her experience and steady presence. The labor was long, nearly 20 hours, and there were moments when Olivia thought she could not continue. But Xavier never left her side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, telling her how strong she was, how much he loved her. When their son finally entered the world with a lusty cry, Olivia collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but elated. Xavier cut the cord with shaking hands, and Sarah cleaned and wrapped the baby before placing him in Olivia's arms. "He is perfect," Olivia whispered, studying the tiny red face, the shock of dark hair, the fingers that gripped her thumb with surprising strength. "Just like his mother," Xavier said, his voice thick with emotion. They named him James after Xavier's father, with the middle name of Robert after Olivia's father. Little James was a healthy, hungry baby who kept them awake more nights than not, but neither parent complained. The sound of his cries, the weight of him in their arms, the miracle of his existence, made every sleepless night worth it. As James grew, the cabin rang with his laughter. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, curious about everything. Xavier proved to be a devoted father, often found walking the floor at night with his son, singing old songs his mother had taught him, or telling stories about his brothers. When James was 6 months old, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news brought a mixture of joy and trepidation. 2 children so close together would be challenging, but they would manage. They always did. Their daughter arrived the following spring, an easier birth than her brother had been. They named her Margaret after Olivia's aunt, with the middle name Rose. Maggie, as they called her, had her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn chin. From the start, she was fiercely independent, wanting to do everything herself. The cabin was too small now for their growing family, so Xavier and Douglas spent that summer expanding it, adding 2 more rooms and a larger kitchen. The other ranch hands helped when they could, and by autumn, they had a proper house, modest but comfortable. Life settled into a rhythm over the next few years. Xavier advanced to full partner at Running Creek Ranch, Douglas recognizing his friend's contributions and loyalty by offering him a stake in the business. The ranch prospered, expanding their operations and gaining a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing. Olivia became known throughout the territory as a skilled healer, her experiences with Frostbite and Sarah's childbirth having sparked an interest in medicine. She read every medical text she could get her hands on, learning from the local doctor when he made his rounds, and soon people were coming to her for help with everything from broken bones to difficult births. Sarah and Olivia became true friends, their children growing up together like siblings. Emma, Samuel, James, and Maggie were inseparable, ranging across the ranch in a pack, getting into the kinds of trouble that made their parents simultaneously exasperated and amused. Years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of family life. James's first day helping with the cattle roundup at age 8. Maggie learning to ride before she was 5, fearless in a way that gave Xavier gray hairs. The winter when everyone got sick with influenza and Olivia nursed them all back to health, barely sleeping for a week. The summer drought that nearly broke them, followed by rains that saved the herd. Through it all, Xavier and Olivia's love deepened. They had their disagreements, their difficult days, their moments of frustration with each other and with life. But underneath it all was a foundation of trust and respect and genuine affection that never wavered. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Xavier took Olivia back to the spot where he had first kissed her, out on the range under the wide Arizona sky. The children were with Sarah and Douglas for the night, giving them rare time alone. "You remember the first time I brought you here?" Xavier asked, holding her hand as they walked. "I remember everything about that day, how nervous I was riding astride for the first time, how you told me I was a natural, how you said you had been waiting for me. I meant it then, and I mean it now. Every day with you has been a gift, Olivia, even the hard days, especially the hard days because we faced them together. Olivia turned to him, this man who had saved her life in more ways than one, who had given her a home and a family, and a love she had never dreamed possible. I fell into your arms half frozen and terrified, and you warmed me back to life. Not just my body, but my heart, my soul. You taught me what it means to be loved, Xavier, to be cherished, to be safe. He cupped her face in his hands, those strong, gentle hands that had nursed her frostbitten fingers, built their home, held their children. And you taught me that the past does not have to define the future. That broken things can be mended, that it is never too late to find your home. They kissed as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. And in that moment, under the vast western sky, they were exactly where they were meant to be. The years continued to roll by, bringing new joys and challenges. When James was 15 and Maggie 13, Olivia discovered to her surprise that she was pregnant again. She had thought those days were behind her, but life had other plans. Their second son, Daniel, arrived when Olivia was 38, and his birth brought a fresh energy to the household. James and Maggie adored their baby brother, and Xavier, now in his early 40s, found himself walking the floor at night once again, singing the old songs to a new audience. The ranch continued to thrive. James showed an aptitude for ranching and announced his intention to stay on, eventually becoming a partner like his father. Maggie, ever independent, declared she wanted to study medicine properly, not just learn from her mother and the local doctor. With Sarah's help and encouragement, she applied to a medical school in San Francisco that had just begun accepting women students. The day they put Maggie on the train for California, Olivia cried despite her pride. Her daughter was following her dreams, but letting her go was hard. Xavier held her hand as the train pulled away, understanding her tears. She will be fine. She is strong like her mother. I know, but I will miss her. We all will. But she will come back. This is her home just like it is ours. Xavier was right. Maggie came back 3 years later with a medical degree and a determination to open a practice in Castle Dome. The town had grown over the years, and the old doctor was ready to retire. Maggie took over his practice and quickly earned the respect of the community with her skill and dedication. James married a girl from a neighboring ranch, a spirited young woman named Catherine who fit into the family as if she had always been there. They gave Xavier and Olivia their first grandchild, a little girl named Olivia after her grandmother, and Olivia felt her heart expand with a love she had not known existed. Daniel grew into a quiet, thoughtful boy who loved books and learning. He spent hours in Douglas and Sarah's library, reading everything he could find. Eventually, he decided to become a teacher, wanting to bring education to the small communities scattered across the territory. As Xavier and Olivia entered their 50s, they found themselves with an empty nest for the first time in decades. The house felt too quiet, too big. But they also rediscovered the simple pleasure of each other's company without the constant demands of child rearing. They took to riding out together in the evenings, just as they had when they were courting. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, comfortable in their silences and their words. They made love with the familiarity of long practice, but also with the passion that had never quite faded, their bodies knowing each other completely. Douglas and Sarah remained their closest friends, their children intertwined, their lives woven together. When Douglas's health began to fail in his late 60s, it was Xavier who took over more of the day-to-day running of the ranch, while Olivia and Maggie worked together to keep him comfortable. Douglas died peacefully in his sleep one winter night, with Sarah holding his hand and Xavier sitting nearby. The entire territory mourned his passing. He had been a man ahead of his time, proving that people of different backgrounds could not only work together but thrive together. Sarah lived another 5 years after Douglas, spending her time with her grandchildren and her books. When she passed, it was Olivia who sat with her at the end, holding her hand just as Sarah had held Douglas's. "You have been a true friend," Sarah whispered, her voice weak but clear. "Thank you for that. Thank you for everything. Thank you for welcoming me when I had nothing, for seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else. Xavier saw you first. I just had the good sense to let him keep you close." They both smiled at that, and then Sarah closed her eyes and slipped away. The losses were hard, but life continued. James and Catherine had 3 more children, filling the ranch with noise and energy. Maggie married late, at 35, to a fellow doctor who came west to work with her. They had 1 son, born when Maggie was 37, and she brought him to visit his grandparents often. Daniel found work teaching at a school for Apache children, controversial work that made some people angry, but that filled him with purpose. He never married, but he had dozens of students who thought of him as family. Xavier and Olivia grew old together, their hair going gray and white, their hands becoming gnarled with arthritis, their steps slower. But their minds remained sharp, their love undimmed. On a summer evening in 1923, 45 years after Olivia had fallen half frozen into Xavier's arms, they sat together on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the mountains. They were both in their 70s now, their faces lined with the years but their eyes still bright. "Do you ever regret it?" Olivia asked, her hand in Xavier's as always. Taking in that frozen, terrified woman all those years ago, Xavier turned to look at her, his expression tender. "Not for a single moment. That was the day my life truly began. Mine too." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear their great-grandchildren playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "I love you," Xavier said, the words as true as the first time he had spoken them. "I love you too," Olivia replied. "Always." As the night deepened around them, they remained on the porch, hands clasped, hearts entwined. 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a life together that had spanned decades and generations. The cowboy who had warmed away her frostbite and fear had become her partner, her love, her home. And that love, tested by time and hardship, proven through joy and sorrow, would endure until their last breaths and beyond. A legacy passed down through their children and grandchildren, a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and choosing to love despite all the reasons to be afraid. The years continued gently. Xavier and Olivia celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. James organized the celebration at the ranch, now fully his to run, with Catherine's steady hand beside him. Maggie closed her practice for the day and brought her family. Daniel arrived with several of his former students, now grown and successful, who wanted to honor the man and woman who had supported his teaching work. The party lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and stories told about the old days. Xavier and Olivia sat in chairs of honor, holding court like the patriarch and matriarch they had become. Young children sat at their feet, listening wide-eyed to stories of blizzards and frostbite, of men who had to be faced down, of a ranch built on principles of equality and fairness. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Olivia leaned against Xavier's shoulder, tired but happy. "We did well, did we not?" she murmured. "We did better than well. Look at them all, Olivia. Our children, their children, their children's children, all of them strong and good and making their way in the world. We built something that will last." "You built something," she corrected gently. "The moment you chose kindness over indifference. We built it together. Everything we have, everything we are, we built together." Xavier died 2 years later peacefully in the bed he had shared with Olivia for over 5 decades. He simply did not wake up one autumn morning, his heart having given out in his sleep. Olivia woke beside him and knew immediately that he was gone. She did not cry, not at first. Instead, she lay beside him for a while longer, her hand over his heart, saying goodbye to the man who had been her everything. The funeral was attended by hundreds. Xavier had been respected and loved throughout the territory, known for his fairness, his integrity, his kindness. People came from as far as Phoenix and Tucson to pay their respects. But it was the words of the Apache elder, one of Daniel's friends, that moved everyone to tears. This man saw people, not colors. He saw hearts, not histories. The Great Spirit blessed him with wisdom and blessed all of us by putting him in our path. May his journey to the next world be swift, and may he find peace. Olivia scattered some of Xavier's ashes in the spot where he had first kissed her, where they had returned so many times over the years. The rest she kept in an urn on the mantel, not ready to let go completely. She lived another 3 years without him, surrounded by family, still helping Maggie occasionally at the medical practice, still riding out to their special spot when the weather was good. But those who knew her well could see that part of her had gone with Xavier, that she was waiting, ready to follow when the time came. On a spring morning in 1928, 50 years almost to the day after she had arrived in Castle Dome with frostbite and fear, Olivia Ellsworth passed away in her sleep, a smile on her face as if she were greeting someone she had missed. Her children found her with Xavier's old shirt clutched in her hands, the one he had worn the day they met. On her nightstand was a letter written in her still steady hand, addressed to all of them. "My beloved children," it read, "do not grieve for me. I have lived a life richer and fuller than I ever dreamed possible, all because one man chose kindness when he could have walked away. Xavier gave me everything, a home, a family, a love that sustained me through every trial. I go to him now with joy, ready to spend eternity with the man who warmed away my frostbite and fear and taught me what it meant to truly live. Love each other as we loved you. Be kind as your Father was kind. Build good things that will last. And know that our love for you continues wherever we are. Your loving mother." They buried her beside Xavier on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains and the vast Arizona sky. The headstone, simple but elegant, read, "Xavier and Olivia Ellsworth." They found each other in a storm and built a love that weathered all seasons. The ranch continued for generations, run first by James and his children, then by his grandchildren. Maggie's practice became a small hospital that served the region for decades. Daniel's students became teachers themselves, spreading education across the territory and beyond. But more than the buildings or the businesses or the land, what Xavier and Olivia left behind was a legacy of love. Their descendants told stories about them for generations, about the frozen woman and the cowboy who saved her, about a love that began in the worst of circumstances and became the foundation of something beautiful and lasting. On cold winter nights, when the wind howled across the Arizona desert and snow occasionally fell, children would sit by the fire and hear the tale of how their great-great-grandmother arrived with frostbite and fear, and how their great-great-grandfather warmed both away, not just with fire and blankets, but with a love that changed everything. And somewhere, in whatever place souls go when they leave this world, Xavier and Olivia were together still, hands clasped, hearts entwined, their love eternal and unbreakable, a testament to the power of choosing compassion over indifference, of choosing love over fear, of choosing to hold on even when the storm rages and the cold seems unbearable. Because in the end, that is what love does. It warms, it heals, it transforms, it endures, and their love, born in a moment of desperate need and nurtured through decades of joy and sorrow, had done all of those things and more. It had created a family, built a legacy, and proved that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most ordinary moments of kindness, when one person sees another's need and simply chooses to help. That was how it began, with Frostbite and Fear, with a cowboy and a woman who had lost everything. And that was how it continued, through every season of their lives, until the very end and beyond. A love story for the ages, written in the Wild West under the vast Arizona sky, as true and enduring as the land itself.